Celia Lashley was an inspiration to many people, particularly in the areas of social justice, education and corrections. Tonight we replay an interview I recorded with Celia in 2012. She talks about what she saw as the most significant factors in raising good men. I hope you enjoy it as we pay tribute to this wise and remarkable woman. Celia, thank you very much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
In some ways, the title of the book suggests that it's a book to reassure particularly mums, perhaps, of teenage boys.
Oh, absolutely. And there's two parts to the title. The He'll Be Okay. A strong realisation for me that in the years of raising a boy as a single parent, I was divorced and had 2 children.
And you had seen the, I suppose, the negative side of this through your experience in the prison service.
And many, many young men in prison are not there because they woke up one day and thought, I think I'll go to prison, but because they make 30-second decisions. So all I wanted was someone to look at me. I realised that I would have, if another woman could have looked at me and smiled and said, he'll be okay. The second part of the title, The Growing Gorgeous Boys, I had some argument with the publishers. They didn't want the word gorgeous in there. But in a way, the boys that I fronted it, we all think our boys are gorgeous, and fronting them en masse in boys' schools. They're just gorgeous. I mean, they're annoying, frustrating, messy, smelly, disorganised, lazy on occasion, but they're gorgeous. And so the gorgeous word is crucial that we hold on to it.
Tell us more about the Good Man Project. This is something which, well, from my understanding, you almost got tricked into doing.
Almost tricked into doing. I'd a man who's now the headmaster at manhood High was running Nelson College, and we had a conversation. I was doing some other work in Nelson, and he approached me, and we had a conversation, and I talked about what they did in boys' schools, that I was curious about what they'd done. I sent my boy to a single-sex boys' school, but I still had a lack of understanding about what the overarching, what they did and their rites of passage. That was my challenge. What do you do inside these schools? What do boys do? And he said, I aligned it with prison, and he got a bit interested in why I did that. And he said, why don't you come and talk to the heads of boys' schools? Okay. And, initially I said no, but he persuaded me. And I went and talked to them, and then he said, I think you should go and let's have a go at going and talking to boys and see what boys tell you. And it started off with 6 schools, and who were kind of involved but no real sense of what they were doing, and then it just looped up, and in the end it was 25 schools. Talked to a hell of a lot of boys and just asked them about their world, sex, drugs, rock and roll. What is it like to be a boy in today's world? What do you see? What do you think a good man is? When do you think you'll be a man? Tell me about girls. What about your mother? How many of you want to be like your dads? In the nicest possible way. They're much simpler creatures than we imagine. Yeah. But the simplicity is imbued with this extraordinary wisdom, and we need to learn, to take our dilemmas to them and ask them, because they do have the most extraordinary insight into the world.
What were your perhaps preconceived ideas about the project as you got involved in it, or the world of boys' schools in particular?
And boys' schools I'd imagined were paramilitary, over-the-top, disciplinarian, antiquated. For example, I remember walking in and sometimes in the early stages being overpowered in some of the older boys' schools with imagery that was of the world gone by. So I can think of a school that had photos of the men who had been at the school who'd become soldiers, so there were memorials to soldiers, there were photos of lawyers and photos of judges, and part of my egalitarian view of the world is inclined to make me want to put my fingers down my throat about that stuff. And so there was, initially there was a sensory reaction to that, and I just kept quiet. Gradually I came to understand that actually boys love that. Boys love tradition, they love ritual, they love hierarchy. So it's like one of the things that I began to get an intuitive sense of is when a boy walks in to a boys' school that has that history, he almost sees a banner that says, welcome to the world of men, that you too will be here one day, and you're coming in. So there was this acknowledgement of the boys' delight in looking up and saying, I'm part of something bigger than me. And I think that's one of the things that I've now understood about men. Men have a natural drawing towards being something bigger than themselves. So my sense of manhood is a continuum, and one of the expressions that I heard from a man when I asked when he became a man was he said, when my father died and his mantle settled on me, and he would have been 55. when his dad died. So you can, you know, so that's that continuum. And we think manhood's an entry point, but it's actually a series of entry points into this continuum. There's a couple of images in there. One is that what I see for a lot of adolescent boys for a long time is they exit the doorway to boyhood and they run towards the doorway to manhood, but they come back and forward like that. So one minute he's the sensible, articulate boy, next minute he's a complete moron, doing something absolutely, you know, you're struck dumb at the stupidity of what he just did. So there's that image, but there's also, in the modern world, there's this continuum of climbing to a plateau and resting for a while and then climbing to the next plateau. So, because one of the conversations I had is that I couldn't get over the wisdom of year 13s. Like, they were just divine. They were just seriously gorgeous boys. And someone said to me and reminded me, yeah, but if they're so good then, you know, what happens next? And I said, well, because I mean, I remember that too, you know. He does 19, he can go back to doing some moronic things. So it's like he gets to a plateau as year 13, he looks around, he's the top of this pile, and he breathes and he responds to that, and then he steps off and goes around the moron complex again. And they, you know, they start to come seriously out of it about 25, you know, in my view, and cross into manhood. This is talking to other men, they cross into manhood about 30. The final pieces of manhood arrive at around 30. So, but that's just a woman's view. It's kind of trying to understand that process.
And perhaps some of us never grow up in that regard. I mean, society generally, though, there's a lot of negative male stereotypes around, and perhaps a lack of positive male role models for boys growing into men to look up to.
Yeah, and we can talk about the... people's heads will instantly go possibly to the gangs and the men who are in prison and that. But I'd want to come back over here, into let's, you know, an average middle class, and in terms of what I saw on the plane that led me writing the book, and then saw something in a cafe as well. Boy, when I said, how many of you want to be like your dad? And not many did, and I pushed the conversation a bit further, and he looked up and he said ever so calmly, I don't want to be like my dad. He lacks the courage of his convictions. He will not stand up to my mother. And you see what he's doing? Now, that's not the role. We can console ourselves about the men who are absent and in prison. Yeah. This man is absent anyway. Stand up to her. You know, so the boys need those role models, and they need to see men claiming what it is to be good men. They need to see men who stand secure in their maleness, whatever that is.
So, in some ways, this book was written as a call to women to step back, to allow their boys to grow into men, and also a call for men to be the role models they need to
stand up. When I talk to audiences, the two messages are for her, step back and be quiet, trust yourself and trust this boy, that to be a good man, he has to let you go. But the message for fathers is stand up where your boy can see you. Let him, even if it means you get into some trouble. Push for, you know, doing things where women are kept out. Push for male-only space, for male-only conversations. But push for yourself, create the space. Stand up and be clearly visible wherever this boy looks, that he can see his dad.
Celia, we were talking about the education system, and in particular there's a perception that it's a female-dominated area, that there's a strong female perspective there. Is it tough for boys to succeed academically, do you think?
I can imagine people's immediate response to that, but my personal view is yes. I think the thing we have to acknowledge, and it's particularly prominent in primary schools, there's a number of issues that are threaded in there, but the end result for me is that I think there's a feminisation not only of the curriculum but of the environment. So the voices the boys hear are women. Many boys in this country will come through primary school and never have a male teacher, or they have one standout male teacher somewhere in the process, but many will have none at all. And the combination that means is that at home there's often women, and then at school there's women, and then when you get into the area of behaviour management, psychologists, social workers, you know, all women. So there is a culture. The thing that I find interesting for me, I keep talking about my culture, that the education system is dominated by me, and me is white, middle-class, well-educated women. Now, we think we're neutral in this country because we have conversation about Pacifica, about Māori, about other cultures. There's kind of an interesting thing that we women do, which I think is that we assume we're the neutral ones, and so we don't realise we have a culture, and yet we have a very strong culture. We have a culture about how we interact. We have a culture about how we communicate. And often boys are lost inside that communication. So we talk at boys, we say things 4 times. I watch young teachers that they think teaching is to talk, you know, and you can see boys' ears hurting. They have no idea what she's saying to them because she's talking in quite a high voice because she's quite young. And it gets hard. So in many, many ways, the values of women, the way of women's communication has become the norm. And that leaves boys struggling. And the thing that I'm saddest about is the boys express the feeling of feeling wrong. And when I said to them, you know, what do you mean wrong? And they just said, there's just a feeling that we're always wrong, that we're too noisy, we're too messy, we're not tidy enough in our work. So I've had some examples of a teacher comparing work, a boy getting 97% in a maths test and the mother being called in to talk about the quality of his work because it was untidy. And the teacher showed the parent a tidy girl's maths test. Well, it was a maths test. He got 97%. Yeah. So the analysis of the heart of the matter for me is the analysis, and I keep talking to teachers about it, analyses this good boys' behaviour or bad behaviour. And what many women do is, because it's inconvenient, because it annoys us, because they won't sit still, we classify what is actually boys' behaviour as bad behaviour. And it goes up from there.
As well as just, I suppose, the academic achievement side of things, the way in which this affects boys not only doing well academically but surviving adolescence. What you talk about is crossing the bridge of adolescence. What do you mean by that too?
From an early stage, the 2 parts that I keep talking to mothers about is link action and consequence as early as you can. So let him have a sense that he is in control of his world to a degree. So even little things, even as a 4-year-old, you know, 3-year-old, there's that sense of saying, if you do this, this will happen, and letting it happen. I'm thinking of some examples with the grandsons. So if you do that, you'll lose 5 minutes of the half an hour you're allowed on the iPod, right? And so he does it, and he loses it. And he gets really angry, you know, he gets mad that he's lost the 5 minutes, and then he works to earn it back. Now, he's at 4, he's processing information in and out about, so if I do this, if I don't go and pick up my pyjamas and put them in the laundry basket like Mummy or Nana just asked, I'm going to lose 5 minutes, right? Now, there's no harm done to him, you know, or either way. But if you don't do it, then my sense is that he gets to 17 and he's suddenly able to do stuff, and he hasn't learnt the art of decision making. And so he gets into a car, having had 1 beer when he shouldn't, crashes the car and kills his best mate. I'd rather he learns about, you know, losing 5 minutes on the iPod than standing in a police cell knowing that he's responsible for the death of his best friend. So I keep saying to women, I'm not making this up, this is serious stuff. He's got to learn decision making, and I don't want him to learn the first decision making when he's 17, because by then he's making really dangerous decisions.
The role of dads in all of this, and in particular mums allowing dads to be dads so that the boys can become men and not shouting out instructions about how she would have done it if she was in that situation, and just biting your tongue. That can be a tough one.
Yes, it can be a tough one, and it is literally, you know, there's that sense of just reminding yourself to pull the zip across your mouth and don't say anything. I keep encouraging mothers to actually watch men, because once you start to realise that, you know, the communication is there, you can laugh more, because you can actually, there's some astonishing exchanges. But men do have to, you know, as we said before, you know, men have to stand up, men have to claim their space. And they have to insist sometimes. Actually, you know, and maybe, you know, once a week or whatever, we're going out and you're not coming, you know, we're going to do some men things. And it may involve dirt, and it may involve, you know, dangerous activity, but, you know, and we'll tell you as little of it. So her job is then, when they come back in, not to say, so what did you do? Where'd you go? Who'd you see? It's simply, did you have a good time? Yep. Get those dirty clothes on and put them in the washing machine. So, you know, it's that, there needs to be, and it's for men too. The image I often say to fathers is, I've met boys who the only time that their father's eyes are on them is when he's come to the police cell at 2 in the morning to get him out. And I'm not talking low socioeconomic, I'm talking upper middle class. And if boys actually, even though he knows his father will be angry, if that's the only time he gets his father's eyes on him, he'll just keep going back. He'll go back and he'll go back. And he'll live for the moment that the cell door swings open and his father's finally looking at him. And the expression I often have in my head as I watch boys behave that way is the boy's actually saying to his dad, "Can you see me yet?" So it's that the paradox of parenthood is the being involved for fathers and the stepping back for mothers.
Celia, we very much appreciate your time. Thank you very much for joining us.
You're very welcome.
That was Celia Lashley from the 2012 interview I recorded with her.